Hello, everyone, and welcome to the FighterHeart Podcast. I'm Joe Rizzo,
I'm Ryan Costello.
and we are sitting here today with Amy Palmiero-Winters. Hello,
Thanks
Amy.
for having me, guys.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. We're going to just dive right into it and get a little bit of your story. I know you just did your interview,
Yes.
so we want to learn more, everything we can about you.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to learn about me. The one thing is that I think my favorite ice cream is Twist. So as I'm sitting here with this microphone, I'm envisioning a giant Twist cone.
Soft serve, of course.
Absolutely, because my first purchase in life was a soft serve ice cream machine.
Yeah?
That's right.
Like adult purchase, like you got a job. First thing you
Absolutely.
got was,
A
yeah.
Twist ice cream machine that had the additional spots for the flavors.
yeah, that's usually what everyone does when they get
Exactly.
money. They first,
So I have to just start off by saying one of my claims to fame is not what I do, but it's the fact that my children had ice cream every day for 3 summers in a row.
Wow.
I mean,
Can't
that's
get better
an
than that.
achievement in itself.
That's right.
I'd say.
And if there wasn't ice cream available, you had to at least have 3 popsicles to qualify for a full ice cream.
I used to live off those little, the long, skinny,
like the different
ices,
color ones?
the different ices, and you cut off the top, but then you still eat the top.
I used to just bite the plastic right off.
yeah, I can imagine you not being patient. Just rip it up. But back to you, Amy.
I know.
So give us a little bit of your fighter heart story, and then maybe we'll go on a timeline. Have you always been into athletics growing up?
So if we're looking at my fighter heart story, I look back, everybody has a foundation. Everybody has what their parents or a guardian or some hero in their life instilled in them. And my father was just a phenomenal athlete. He was a world-class athlete, had records, went into the military, lifted for the military. So it was kind of really not up to me where kind of sports came into play, because he just literally didn't.
You had no choice.
He didn't encourage you. He literally just threw you into it. And we were fortunate enough that we really didn't have a pot to piss in. So for me, running was something you could do anywhere. I remember my dad says, "You're going to go to run a race." And I was like, "Oh, geez, oh man." And I always tell this story. I was this funky looking little kid. I mean, funky little kid. He used to call me, like Twiggy or something like that. And I had this little teeny scrawny little body and this big old pumpkin head and a big calic. And we were definitely, back in the 70s, had no fashion sense. I didn't, with the polyester pants and everything. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to run this race when I don't even have cool shoes? I don't even have a cool outfit. So my cousin, who was like 3 feet taller than me, I swear, and her feet were like 4 inches too big, much bigger than mine, she gave me a pair of Nike shoes. And I remember being upstairs in the bathroom, and I stuffed toilet paper in the end of the shoes, and I got my shoes on and got to the starting line, and I'm looking around, and the little air horn goes off, and I took off running down that track, like just elbows and, elbows, and running down the track, and came in dead last.
This was the first time
That
you've
was
ever
the first
run?
time I ran a race, yeah. And came in dead last, but it was something that sparked inside me, and it just lit a fire within, and that fire just stayed, and it had to do with running and sports.
How old were you then?
I was 8.
8, first race. And then
First race, 8 years old.
what happened from there? You started training, I guess, right?
Yep, I literally ran everywhere. So we had an ice cream, it was called a dairy aisle back then. We had a dairy aisle. So I would run from our dairy aisle with the ice cream and the hot dogs to school and back home and over here and over there. So for me, running was just everything. It was, number one, the means of travel back in the day, and besides the Flintstones, Barney Rubble things. But it was the means of travel, but it was just my outlet. It was something that created who I was. And if I had a bad day, I went out for a run. And it created the confidence in me.
So that's, I guess, all of elementary school. You start getting better and better, I assume. You're not in last anymore.
Yeah, I did a great job, and honestly, I took it for granted. I was basically a giant idiot out there on the field and on the course.
In
Always,
what way?
just always goofing off, always having a good time, and not having a good time in a bad way. And not that having a good time is a bad thing. But I would be on the track at districts. I won the hurdles, won districts, and then here I am in the 800-meter race, and I'm waving up in the stands, and I'm waving to everybody, and I'm hopping and having a great time, and I came in second place. My
While
dad's
you're
like,
running, you're saying?
yeah, my dad's
Oh.
like, seriously? He's
Oh.
like, seriously.
So you could have won.
But for me, it's
Yeah.
just, I took everything for granted. And that day when I was hit by a car on my motorcycle, it changed my life forever.
So how did we get there? So are you winning awards throughout school, high school? Are you?
We were kids that we rode dirt bikes, rode mini bikes. We took everything, every piece of junk that we could find, and we built it, whether it was with my dad and stuff. And we were always racing around the lawn. We had 114 acres. So for me, the evolution of getting a motorcycle was just a part of life.
Mm.
I went to college, did a walk-on the cross-country team, got a walk-on scholarship, and just unfortunately couldn't afford school and had to drop out of college and started working. I became a welder.
So you stopped running at this point? You
Nope,
weren't competing anymore?
I always ran.
Okay.
I ran and I started running road races. And one of my friends said to me, he said, I bet you can't run a marathon. And I said, well, what is a marathon? And he said, it's 26.2 miles. And I was like, I can run that, no problem. And the longest I was running at the time was like 3 to 4 miles. And I said, it's no problem. When is it? And he's like, next week.
Oh,
wow.
And I was like, okay, I'll do it.
Jump right
And
into it.
we went out, ran the Erie Marathon. I ended up winning my age group, put in the fastest time for a first-timer marathoner, and qualified for Boston.
Wow.
So if you know anything about marathons, Boston's like the mecca.
Like New York, basically, right? And
Everybody wants to be able to run the big marathons, whether it's London, Berlin, New York, Chicago, and Boston. And so being able to qualify for Boston was quite an accomplishment.
Wow. So you can't, it's no one, I thought like anyone can run the marathon. You have to qualify to run.
For Boston, you have to qualify.
What about New York? No, right?
For New York,
It's bigger.
you can enter a lottery. You can enter as a charity. And there's different ways that you can enter. And now they actually make it really accessible, especially for New York and the local areas. It's essentially called, I think, the 9+1. If you run specific races and volunteer at some races, you'll actually gain an automatic entry, not that year, but the following year.
Got you.
So
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. But usually, like, people train months for these marathons. So you
Absolutely.
only had a week, and you've.
I didn't even have a week. I didn't even have a week.
So, like, what was that like once you passed your normal 3 to 4 miles? Like, was it a challenge,
shock,
or were you
yeah.
just like in the zone going
I
for
was
it?
just having a great time. I
You were waving
really
at the crowd.
was just having a great time. Crossed the finish line, was like, holy cow, what the heck's going on? And that's kind of what set the path in my life for doing longer distances. We went on, ran the Boston Marathon, qualified for the following year, and then soon after that is when I was hit by a car and lost my leg. And I remember sitting there and just realizing that I took everything for granted. All the gifts that you have in life, you take for granted. And I was explaining earlier that if the whiteboard says 5 rounds, why do you stop at 5? Why not give it 6 and then take yourself to that next level? Because you never know who you're going to be until you push past that point. And I never knew who I was because I had never pushed past that point. And that's, we're sitting here and we're talking about the fighter's heart. And that's what it's all about is going through that struggle and going to that point or that lowest point and picking yourself back up and basically reinventing who you are.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to do that because second chances are not a given.
No, definitely not. Can you walk us through that day? Like, were you just going out for a run like normal? And did you have your headphones in or something?
When I had my accident, I was actually on a motorcycle.
Oh, okay.
And for me, riding a motorcycle was second nature. That's what we did. I used to BMX bike race, dirt bike race, go-kart race. So getting on a motorcycle and getting out there on the road was just normal, was second nature. I remember it was a group of us. We were out riding and we were just heading down this road. And there was always like an unwritten rule. If you got separated from the pack, you didn't feel uncomfortable, somebody would always wait if they turned. So everybody was passing. They were passing on the left. They were passing on the right. And I remember not wanting to go where we were going. You know, everybody will say you always get that little feeling, and you just, sometimes you got to listen to it. And I didn't listen to it because I didn't want to go where we were going.
Was it like a busier road than usual?
No, I just didn't. I just wanted to stay where we were. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go into the next town. I didn't want to go into the next pub. And I remember staying back. So everybody was, you know, crack the throttle and off they went. And I remember staying back a little bit. And as we always did, they always waited at the turn. So everybody was waiting at the turn. I made the turn and started going up the hill. And as I was going up the hill, at the top of the hill, there was a crossroad. And that crossroad had a stop sign. And that crossroad happened to be the road that I grew up on. So
you knew the area.
I knew the area. My dad, he found me this little car. It was this little Volkswagen Rabbit. It was in a fire. It was a diesel Rabbit. It was all burned up. Everything was melted. And I remember he would have me at the top of the hill at the stop sign. He would make me put the car in neutral, roll down the windows, turn off my radio, because if someone was coming up over that hill, you couldn't see them because it was a blind hill, but you could hear them. So he would make me stop, roll down my window, listen for the cars, and then he would let me go. So I happened to be that person coming up the hill that day. Jeez. And I remember coming up to the top of the hill, and the bike that I had, it was an 883 Sportster, a Harley, because they don't make any other motorcycles besides Harleys, you know. And I remember coming up over the hill and my pipes were crazy loud. So I remember like really cracking on the throttle and the bike, just the noise vibrating, and time stood still. It literally went to a stop. And as I crested the hill, I saw the car sitting on the right. I saw the person in the car. It was a woman. It was a blue car. She had blonde hair. Her window was down. And I made eye contact with her 3 times. And on the 3rd time, I was like, she sees me. And as I started to roll on the throttle and go through the intersection, that's just when she pulled out. And when she pulled out, my bike slammed into the side of her. And I'm fortunate that I was able to ride, and I rode dirt bikes, that my bike slammed into the side of her and I never went down.
You stayed on it? I
stayed on the bike, went to a slow stop, and just stopped on the side of the road. And my crew, who was behind me, because they were coming up the hill because they had waited at the stop sign at the bottom, the one guy, Joe, he literally pulled over on the side of the road, got off his bike, and picked me up off my bike and carried me to the grass.
And your leg, I'm sure,
it was just a mess.
Hanging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just laid there and
did
not
you feel
really
anything, or did you kind of like black out at this point? Or
from my understanding, for me, when I go into so much pain, when I go into shock, I actually start laughing. And when I go into so much pain, I start laughing. So I remember being on the ground and just kind of giggling, and I remember being embarrassed because I didn't want everybody to think I was a wimp.
You even fall off the bike.
No. No. And I remember at that time, because I was a welder, I'm thinking, crap, I got to go to work tomorrow. What am I going to do? You know, I can't be doing this. I got to go to work tomorrow. Yeah. And here they were trying to decide what to do, but the only option was to cut my leg off.
Well, so an ambulance, obviously, they called right away, yeah. Right? So they took you in there. Did they say anything while you're in there on the way to the hospital?
Nope, didn't say anything, but I had the best crew on the way to the hospital because all I wanted to do was hold somebody's hand.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a great
And you
guy.
had
He
a-
held my hand the whole way.
So you get into the hospital. What's the first thing that they say while you're in there?
So when I was in the hospital, they really weren't saying anything to me. Not to me. I was in the emergency room, and where I'm from, my family, like my grandpa, he was like the mayor of the town. And everybody knew I was an athlete. Everybody knew I was a runner. And immediately they knew that my foot had been crushed. So my foot and my ankle had been crushed between the bike and the car. And it just immediately started to swell. And the only option that they had was to cut it off.
Wow.
And here I was, this athlete. My father was an athlete, this family of the community. And the last thing they wanted to do was end my career as an athlete. So they were actually waiting and put out a bunch of calls to different hospitals to see who would take me, who would come get me.
Like
And
a second opinion almost? Or
No, just somebody to fly in and get me. And I remember my mom grabbing the doctor by like his lapels and saying, "What the hell is going on? What is going on with my daughter?" And he said, "We have to amputate her leg." And they had lost a son at a young age. And so for them to see their daughter kind of laying there in the bed in a bunch of pain, it was, a devastating thing for them as any parent. It's very devastating. And this is one thing, like I'll interrupt the whole the whole session just to say this, that no matter what my parents did, no matter what my parents said, it would have never changed my decision. Things happen in life, and things happen to us as kids, or things happen to us as adults. There was nothing that anybody could have said that would have changed my path. No matter how bad it broke my parents' heart, they couldn't have done anything to change what had happened to me.
yeah.
And I remember my mother's friend, who was a nurse, came running into the room, and just as my mother was going to sign the papers to have them amputate my leg, she stopped her. And there was a helicopter coming from Pittsburgh that was coming to pick me up. That was an amazing flight. I got to fly in a helicopter to Pittsburgh. And at that time, I still didn't know what was going on. I had no clue that they wanted to amputate my leg. So for me, I'm thinking, why am I going to Pittsburgh? I just have a broken foot. My boss came in to the emergency room. He's like, "Don't worry." He's like, "I'll keep your job. Don't worry. You'll be okay." And I'm thinking, what is going on?
It's a broken foot. I'll
Yeah,
put
it's a broken
cast on.
foot.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
like,
okay.
I'll be back to work tomorrow. So none of it made any sense to me. And I spent 2 months in the Pittsburgh hospital just trying to save my foot. And I was fortunate that I had a surgeon who did the unthinkable, and he saved it.
Oh, yeah.
He did. We saved it for 3 years.
Oh, and then what changed? Why did they have to take it off?
For instance, if my foot was a size 7.5, after my accident, everything had died. All the bones were crushed. It was down to a size 4.
Oh, jeez.
So the ankle was fused. I had no calf function, and then the foot started to die. And because of that, that's when they had to amputate.
They had to. It wasn't a choice, right? It wasn't
Correct.
like, yeah. Wow. So you're in the hospital for how long did you say in Pittsburgh?
Couple months.
Couple months. When did you make the decision, or I guess, was it even a decision, or was it just like second nature, like I'm going to keep running?
It wasn't even.
Yeah.
I always, one of my friends just recently lost her son, and I can't imagine the hurt and the heartache that she's going through. I can't understand how it feels, but I know for myself, the one thing that got me through was setting goals. So when you have something happen to you, the only thing you can do is set goals, and it gives you something to focus on, something to look towards, something to just kind of dive into and get you through each little moment. And for me, that's what I did. Was I set one goal, and then I reached that goal and set another goal.
So what day one out of the hospital, what's your training rehab process kind of look like? Are you already looking up the next race? Like, all right, I'm going to be in this one.
Well, doctors obviously told me I would never run again. I would never walk again. And that obviously was not an option.
Yeah.
So the next goal for me was to figure out how to get back to running. And running with a fused ankle and or a non-functional calf and a non-functional foot was really difficult to do.
Yeah.
But I was able to achieve those milestones before my loss came. So I did get to go back and run a marathon
With
before
the size 4,
Wow.
yeah, it
was that
tough.
horrible pain, I would assume?
Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, pain is pain. It's something that our mom and dads taught us.
And I guess you just know how to block it out a little better than other
when I
people.
was in the hospital and I was laying in the bed, I remember my dad sitting beside me and saying, "You don't have to push that button. You don't have to push that pain button. You can get through it. You can get through it with your mind." And I remember looking at him and saying, "Okay, I can do it." And then I remember the nurses came in and they're like, "What is going on? Why is she in so much pain?" And he's like, I'm like, "My dad said I could do it with my mind." And they're like, "No, you can't do this with your mind." And they're pushing the buttons and everything.
Of
So
course you can.
it was just something that was taught
Yeah.
as a child, was to get through the pain, to figure it out, and to mentally figure it out.
If you can have a baby, I guess you could do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Had my kids got up and walked right out of the delivery room.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, do you remember your first race without your foot?
Yes.
Can
My
you walk us
first
through
race
that?
with a prosthetic.
Yeah.
I was pushing my kids in a we called it the stroller coaster. I remember pushing my kids in my first race when I actually was able to run with a prosthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was life-changing. It was kind of basically closing another chapter. Life is basically like a book. And if you don't have anything interesting for the readers, then they're not going to continue to read. So it was closing one chapter and starting a new chapter in my life. Mm-hmm. And that's when I heard about the triathlon. And the triathlon was something that was going to go into the Paralympics. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't swim and I can't ride a bike, but I can run 6 miles. And that's what actually led me to New York, where I did the New York City Triathlon, qualified for Hawaii for the World Championships. Wow. I remember being in Hawaii. I got my little 5-month-old daughter and my son and my family there with me. And we crossed the finish line in first place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your first triathlon?
Yeah, my second. And I looked around and everybody kind of laughed at me because my leg was so archaic looking. And I said, man, I gotta get a good leg person. Who's the best? Where's the best? And they're like, well, if you want the best, you got to come to Long Island. There's this guy named Eric. And that's what led me here to New York.
Oh, wow.
And
so this is where we have the best prosthetics?
Yes, this is it.
Because we talked to Rob, who was on the podcast too, who has a prosthetic as well. And he was saying, and he's fairly young, I think in his early 30s.
Yeah.
And he was saying the evolution of prosthetics have changed so much. Do you feel that you've seen that progression?
So for myself, I'm very fortunate that I'm just missing my leg below the knee. Technology has come a long way, but you're going to see the technology more so where the knee components are and the hands and items like that. For myself, I'm kind of like the old dog and no new tricks. I like the same style of foot because it's reliable, it's dependent, it's reliable and it's dependable. And if I get called into action from Joe DeSena in a Spartan race and I got to carry a 100 and some pound backpack for 80 some hours through Japan or the streets of Tokyo, then the prosthetic foot that I've become accustomed to can allow me to do anything, whether I'm running a marathon or I'm carrying my kids up and down stairs or I'm carrying crazy weight on my back for days at a time.
So you've traveled the whole world running and competing.
Yeah.
So after you win that triathlon, because we didn't mention this yet, but you have a few ESPY awards, right? You won a few of those?
Yes.
And you have a few Guinness World Records?
Yes.
So when did all that get...
But I can make one heck of a pancake and a bird's nest. Do you know what a bird's nest is?
I know what a bird's nest is.
Because I'm a better mom than I am a racer. So a bird's nest is a piece of toast with a hole cut out of it and an egg in the middle.
Oh, I've done that with pancakes.
There you go.
That's
So,
cool.
yes. Do I have world records and Guinness records? Yes. But
You make bird nests.
I'm a hero of being a mom.
When did you? Can I go into those? When did
Yes.
that come into play? Did you set your first record before your first SB, or vice versa?
So when I came to New York, I came out here to Hicksville in Long Island to Eric at a Step Ahead Prosthetics. I walked in that facility. I had my 2 kids. We stayed in the Econo Lodge.
Wow.
Brought my mom here. I had my 2 little kids. We pulled into the parking lot after driving 9 hours. Pulled in at 6 a.m., washed up in the gas station across the street, walked in the door. At 7 a.m., I was casted and running on the treadmill by 10 a.m.
Wow.
So that was February of 2006. And I went on to set my first world record in the Chicago Marathon that was not only a few months later.
So 2006.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a world record that had stood, my gosh, for many, many years in the marathon.
What was it? What was the actual record?
I don't even know what the time was, but I broke it by running a 3:24
Mile?
and then 3:24, 3 hours and 24 minute marathon. That's 26.2 miles. And then we went on to set the Chicago Marathon, the world record, reset it in the Chicago Marathon with a 3:04.
Wow, that is crazy. What's your mile? What was your fastest mile you've ever run?
So I've never really set out to run just a mile, but in my training, my mile time has been the low 5-minute miles.
Yeah.
In my training.
We have a KO boxing guy says he ran the 420 something.
Yeah.
That
Which
I'm a
is-
believer.
Yeah.
I'm a believer.
I mean, that's amazing. Okay, so you set that record. Where did the ESPYs come into play? How does that even happen? Do they nominate you? Do you get nominated?
I don't know.
Yeah, like how did that happen?
I don't know. I don't know, but I know I won the Sullivan Award before it. So the Sullivan Award is actually pretty cool. The Sullivan Award is the top amateur athlete in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And para with
Anyone.
wow, that is
Yeah.
so cool.
So I want to say the year before Michael Phelps won it. So yeah,
That's a
getting
big
up
award.
there
Yeah.
to win the Sullivan Award is pretty amazing. And we went on to then, I heard a story of an athlete who was missing his leg. He was the first athlete. He set the triathlon world record for the Ironman. And he heard about Western States. Western States is basically one of the most sought after ultra marathons, much like the Boston Marathon of marathons, but it's an ultra marathon. It's a 100-mile race. And he set out to be the first amputee or athlete with a prosthetic to qualify and finish that. When he got to mile 32, he actually dropped out and said it was the hardest thing he had ever done. It's out in California. You run from the Olympic Valley into Auburn. So it's 100 miles. You're running in snow to start, and you're in 100 and some degree weather to finish. So he
was a third through it, basically.
he said to his wife it was the hardest thing he'd ever done, and he was going to go back and finish it. He was out in Hawaii on a closed course for a triathlon and was actually hit by a cement truck and killed. And when I heard that story, I thought, oh my gosh, I got to go do that for him. And so it then became my goal to run an ultramarathon, qualify for Western States, and finish that race for him and his family. And that's what we did. We went out, set out. We became the first to finish Western States. I finished, crossed the finish line, got sick, went into shock, hopped on a plane, went home, and then the following weekend they had a triathlon in Connecticut that's in his honor, and I was able to present his wife and daughter with the belt buckle from the race.
Wow, that's very cool.
100 miles straight?
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. How long does that, like, normally
Well,
take?
that one took me like 28 hours. But my fastest, we were actually the first to run 100 miles and win it outright for females.
Wow.
Do you
I
take
ran.
breaks
You
during
sleep,
that, or
right?
do
Yeah, you have
No.
to. You don't
No.
sleep for 100,
No.
28 hours?
This one took me 18 hours. No, you didn't sleep. Was out in the chicken prairie capital of the world.
I feel like as soon as you stop, it's like that momentum to do it again is probably too hard.
Well, we
right?
actually we just ran 250 miles.
I like how you say we, because you have a team, right?
You know what? The next time I run, you guys are going to be with me. So
That's
it's
cool.
we. Everything that we do is us together. There's nothing that you do in life that you do solely by yourself. It's anything really good in life is hard. And when you do something hard, it takes the people that you love and or the people that stand beside you to get you through it. You might be the one out there running, but it's the person that you see on the road that waves to you that, for me, that helps me get through it. And we went out and crossed the finish line at 250 miles. Holy cow, was that hard.
Where was that one?
That was Arizona.
That's where they have 250 miles to run around.
And we recently set out to obtain another Guinness record, and it was for the most consecutive ultramarathons. And an ultramarathon is considered 31.06 miles. So for 12 days, I had to run 31.06 miles
Every day.
every day. So I would get up, get my stuff for my family ready, go to work, do my work, leave work right away. My daughter was just the most faithful sidekick ever because she would be standing at the track every day waiting for me when I got there with all my drinks and my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And she would faithfully take pictures as I would run 124 laps around the track.
That's Wonder Woman. That's you can't.
No, the
I
Wonder
can't
Woman
imagine.
is the poor 17-year-old that's sitting out there for 12 days with me.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I can't even imagine. It's like unfathomable how you can do that for 12 days in anything that you're saying you're doing. Really, it's like,
You know what though?
where do you think you get the drive to do that? To do these? Because obviously not everyone does what you're doing.
My drive is those around me, my kids. You look at it this way, the people that you love or the people that you get to meet, like you guys get to meet people all the time. You get to change lives. You get to influence, make the world a better place because of it. You know, there are so many different people out there and role models out there who literally, I'm sorry, but suck. And we have the opportunity to really make a difference. So why not? Why not push past? Why not take that fighter heart and literally just put it right out there and teach people how to fight hard, how to dig deep, and how to, get through the times that suck. And when you get through the times that suck, it kind of stands you up and makes you just want to do more.
How do you have good times without sucky times? You wouldn't
That's
even
right.
notice.
I'll
that
tell you what,
they're
every
good.
time I get into a race, the first 5 hours really are terrible.
Yeah.
And I know it's going to be hard, but anything in life is going to be hard. Anything in life is going to be hard. If it's worth it, it's going to be hard. I was at a gym, and I know we're probably crushing on time here, but I was at a gym and they did a burpee challenge. I love burpees. Mind you, but they did a burpee challenge, and it was 100 days, 100 burpees every day for 100 days. And I said, they're like, Amy, are you in? And I'm like, absolutely. I'm going to do 100 for me, and I'm going to do 100 for someone who can't. So every day I would do 100 burpees or 200 burpees, 100 for me and 100 for someone else. And on the last day, there was this group. It was, this group of 3 athletes, and they were sitting there and they're like, why in the heck would you do that? And I'm like, why not? If you walk out that door and you are hit by a car and your life is over, are you okay with that? Did you do enough? Did you push hard enough?
And this mindset kind of came from your accident, right?
It did.
That's cool.
Did you do enough? Did you push hard enough? Why not push a little harder, dig a little deeper, and be the best that you can?
Yeah. That's awesome, Amy. Well, we did get the wrap up sign like you were saying.
I know. And we got so much more to talk about,
I
but that's
know.
okay.
We can
always do
we'll do another
part
one.
2. Yeah.
Yeah. But to wrap it up, what's some advice you have for someone maybe that was in the same, maybe they're going to go through something similar? And
So my advice, it applies to everybody. Whether you have an accident, whether you lose a limb, it applies to everybody. You're going to have obstacles in life. That's what life is. My friend Joe DeSena, he says, come do the death race. And people will be like, how did you get through